Find your own place by Monday, my mother-in-law Diane commanded from her kitchen throne, waving dismissal at my pregnant wife like she was firing the help. We're selling this house to fund our retirement cruise. You've freeloaded long enough. My wife Melissa burst into tears, already pulling clothes from closets, while I calmly dialed the number I'd been saving for 5 years. The title company that knew exactly whose names were on the deed. The Saturday morning had started like any other in the Riverside home we'd shared with Melissa's parents for 7 years. I was fixing breakfast when Diane marched in with her husband Frank, both dressed like they were heading to a real estate showing. The smell of coffee mixed with Diane's aggressive perfume as she dropped the bomb that would backfire spectacularly. "We've made a decision," Frank announced, avoiding eye contact in that cowardly way of his. "The house goes on the market Monday. Realtor's already scheduled." Melissa, 6 months pregnant with our first child, gripped the counter. "What? Mom, we agreed we'd stay until after the baby." "Plans change," Diane interrupted. "We found a beautiful retirement community in Arizona. Pool golf, people our own age. We're done playing landlord to adults who should have their own home by now." The irony was so thick I could have spread it on toast. Landlords. The word hung in the air like a bad joke waiting for its punchline. "We pay rent," Melissa protested weakly. "We help with everything." "Helping isn't owning," Frank said, finally looking at us. "A man provides his own roof, Kevin. Maybe this is the push you need." I set down my coffee mug carefully, measuring my words. "And you've already made this decision?" "Without discussing it." "Our house, our choice," Diane said. "Monday morning, you need to be gone. We've been more than generous, but it's time you stood on your own feet." Melissa was already spiraling, the way she did when her parents pulled their power plays. "Kevin, we need to start packing. The baby's room, all our things, where will we go?" I pulled out my phone. "Give me a minute." "Who are you calling?" Diane demanded. "This isn't a negotiation. Just handling logistics," I said mildly, finding the contact for First National Title Company. The number I'd programmed in 5 years ago. "Waiting. Logistics?" Frank scoffed. "The only logistics are boxes and a moving truck." The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "First National Title, this is Patricia." "Patricia, it's Kevin Chin. We spoke 5 years ago about the property at 4827 Riverside Drive. You helped with some paperwork." "Mr. Chin." "Of course I remember. The quiet title action. How can I help you?" I watched Diane's face as I spoke. "Could you please confirm the current ownership status of the property? There seems to be some confusion." Melissa had stopped crying, looking at me with confusion. Her parents exchanged glances. "Certainly," Patricia said. I could hear typing. "Let me pull that up. Here we are. 4827 Riverside Drive. Deed shows Kevin and Melissa Chun as sole owners. Free and clear, no liens. The transfer was completed 5 years ago. Could you repeat that, please?" "On speaker." I pressed the button. Patricia's professional voice filled the kitchen. "The property at 4827 Riverside Drive is owned entirely by Kevin and Melissa Chun. Has been for 5 years. Would you like me to email a copy of the deed?" The silence that followed was beautiful. "That would be perfect," I said. "Thank you, Patricia." I hung up and looked at my in-laws. Diane's mouth was opening and closing like a fish. Frank had gone pale. "That's impossible," Diane whispered. "This is our house. We've lived here for 30 years. "You have," I agreed. "As our tenants. For the last 5 years. Melissa grabbed my arm. "Kevin, what? I don't understand. I'd been waiting for this moment for half a decade. Time to finally tell the whole truth. Remember 5 years ago when your parents were about to lose the house?" I asked Melissa gently. "When Frank's business failed and they were 3 months behind on the mortgage?" She nodded slowly. Her parents said nothing. "They came to me," I continued, begging. The bank was starting foreclosure proceedings. They needed $40,000 just to catch up, plus penalties. They had no assets left to borrow against. "You never told me," Melissa said. "They asked me not to. Said it would upset you." I looked at Diane. "Isn't that right?" Diane's perfectly styled hair seemed to wilt. "That was a private arrangement." "Very private," I agreed. "So private that when I offered to help, you insisted on conditions. You didn't want Melissa to know you'd failed financially. You didn't want her to see you as anything less than the successful parents who could criticize others' life choices." Frank found his voice. "You said you'd help family. I did help. I paid off the entire mortgage. $230,000. plus the back payments, plus the penalties. Nearly $300,000 total. Melissa gasped. Kevin, how did you have? The software company I started in college? The one your parents called playing with computers? It was acquired our senior year. I never mentioned the amount because... I glanced at her parents. Well, some people get weird about money. But the house, Frank stammered. You can't just take someone's house. I didn't take anything. You gave it to me. Legally. You insisted on it, actually. I pulled out my phone again, scrolling to save documents. I have the emails. You demanding I take the deed as collateral. You saying you'd rather lose the house to family than the bank. You promising to buy it back within 2 years when your ship came in. That was the understanding, Diane said weakly. A temporary arrangement. 5 years is pretty temporary, I said. How many ships came in, Frank? Silence. Here's what actually happened, I continued. You transferred the deed to us to avoid foreclosure on your credit. I paid off the mortgage. You were supposed to pay us back, but instead you've lived here rent-free for 5 years while I paid taxes, insurance, and maintenance. The rent you thought you were paying us? That was going into an escrow account for the new roof this place needed. Melissa sank into a chair. The roof replacement last year. Our roof, our responsibility, I said. Though your parents took credit for it with the neighbors. This is theft, Diane hissed, finding her venom again. Elder abuse. Taking advantage. Stop. My voice was sharp enough to cut. I have 5 years of emails begging me not to tell Melissa. 5 years of you promising to repay soon. 5 years of you calling me a failure at every family dinner while living in the house I saved. That's taking advantage. I pulled up more emails on my phone. Should I read the one where you called me not man enough to provide for Melissa? That was sent from the master bedroom of the house I own. Or the one where you said I'd never amount to anything while I was paying your property taxes. We didn't know, Frank muttered. Because you never asked. You assumed. I drove a Honda instead of a BMW, so I must be poor. I didn't brag about money, so I must not have any. I worked from home, so I must be unemployed. I looked at each of them. You created a version of me that fit your narrative, the loser who trapped your daughter. It was easier than admitting you needed help from that loser. Melissa was reading the emails on my phone, tears streaming. Mom, you called him pathetic. While living in his house. We thought it was temporary, Diane repeated. What was temporary was my patience, I said. But I waited. Partly because I loved Melissa and didn't want to hurt her. Partly because I wanted to see if you'd ever show gratitude or even basic respect. So what now? Frank asked. You evict us? Your pregnant wife's parents. I laughed. Evict you? Why would I evict you? You're moving to Arizona, remember? The beautiful retirement community? Pool, golf, people your own age. They exchanged panicked looks. There's no retirement community, Melissa said slowly. Is there? Diane's silence was admission enough. They were going to sell the house they thought they owned, I explained. Use the money to maintain their lifestyle. Probably blame the market when they couldn't buy it back from us. We have nowhere to go, Frank admitted. That's not true, I said. You have options. The same options you were giving us an hour ago. Find your own place by Monday. I hear there are lovely apartments available. Of course, they'll want first and last month's rent, credit checks, proof of income. Kevin, Melissa said softly. She was holding her belly, our child. They're still my parents. I nodded. Which is why I'm going to make the same offer I made 5 years ago. You can stay. As tenants. Paying actual market rent, $2,500 a month. Month-to-month lease. Standard tenant rights and responsibilities. $2,500? Diane shrieked. That's highway robbery. That's below market for a 4-bedroom in this neighborhood, I said. Ask your realtor. Oh wait, you should probably cancel them. This is humiliating, Frank said. No, humiliating is being told to leave your own house while 6 months pregnant. This is consequence. I stood, helping Melissa up. We'll draw up a lease. First month's rent due immediately. Security deposit waived because, well, family. But any late payments, any more disrespect, any more lies to our child about who owns this house, and you'll get the same 30-day notice any tenant would. You planned this, Diane accused. You've been waiting. I've been patient, I corrected. There's a difference. I could have had this conversation 5 years ago. Instead, I let you keep your dignity while hoping you'd develop some humanity. My mistake. We started toward the stairs to our room. The master suite Diane had always resented us having. Wait, Frank called out. What if we can't afford the rent? I paused. Then you'll experience what you wished on us. Finding your own place. Standing on your own feet. Being the adults you claimed we weren't. Kevin, Melissa said as we climbed the stairs. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have let me help if you knew they'd treat me worse for it? She shook her head. I'm so sorry. All these years, they've been horrible to you. They've been themselves, I said. I just gave them enough rope. Back in our room, Melissa sat on the bed, processing everything. $2,500 a month. Can they afford that? Frank's Social Security and pension cover it, I said. Barely. They'll have to budget. Maybe even cook instead of eating out 5 nights a week. The cruise was fiction, like their respect for me. I sat beside her. I'm sorry you had to learn this way. I'm not, she said firmly. I'm furious. They've treated you like garbage while living in your house. Insulted you at every opportunity. Made you feel small. She took my hand. Why did you tolerate it? Because I love you. Because they're your parents. Because I hoped, stupidly, that one day they'd see me as more than the inadequate man who stole their daughter. You're the man who saved them, she said. And they couldn't even say thank you. A knock at the door interrupted us. Diane's voice smaller now. Can we talk about the lease? I opened the door. Both in-laws stood there, diminished. The power dynamic had shifted so completely it was almost dizzying. The office downstairs has a printer, I said. Standard California lease agreement. No special terms except one, respect. You'll treat me with the same courtesy you'd show any landlord. You'll treat Melissa as an adult, not a child to manipulate. You'll acknowledge us as the homeowners we are. And if we refuse? Diane asked. Then you'll need to find your own place by Monday. I echoed her words back. Your choice. Stay as respectful tenants or go as bitter former homeowners. Either way, the house remains ours. Frank cleared his throat. The things we said, we didn't mean. You meant every word. I cut him off. You just didn't know who you were saying them to. That's not an apology. That's regret for being caught. What do you want from us? Diane asked. Nothing, I said honestly. I wanted family. I wanted acceptance. I wanted basic human decency. 5 years proved that's not available. So now I want rent. On time. Every month. They signed the lease that afternoon. The check for the first month's rent was written in Diane's perfect penmanship, each digit an admission of defeat. They moved into the downstairs guest suite the next week, giving us the space a growing family needed. The dynamics changed overnight. No more snide comments about my job. No more suggestions that Melissa had settled. No more implications that I wasn't man enough to provide. It's amazing how respect suddenly appears when someone holds your housing security. But the real satisfaction came a month later at a family barbecue. Diane's sister asked about their retirement plans. We're staying put, Diane said carefully. Decided Arizona was too hot. But I thought you were selling the house. Diane glanced at me. I smiled pleasantly, saying nothing. Plans change, she said, echoing her words from that morning. Kevin and Melissa have been generous with letting us stay. Letting you stay? Her sister was confused. It's your house, isn't it? The silence stretched until Frank admitted. Actually, it's theirs. Has been for years. The questions that followed were answered honestly for the first time in 5 years. How Kevin had saved them from foreclosure. How they'd lived in denial and disrespect. How their loser son-in-law owned the roof over their heads. My God, Diane, her sister said. He saved your home, and you've been calling him inadequate? Diane had no answer. What answer could there be? Now, a year later, they're model tenants. Rent paid on time. Respectful interactions. They even babysit their grandson. In our house, under our rules. The power plays ended when the power shifted. Sometimes I wonder if I should have told Melissa sooner. But timing is everything. 5 years ago, she would have been torn between us and them. Now, as a mother herself, she understands the difference between family and those who just share your blood. The house is peaceful these days. No more morning ambushes. No more threats of eviction from people who don't own the property. Just a clear understanding of who owns what, who owes whom, and who saved whose home. They wanted us to find our own place. Turns out we already had. We'd been living in it for 5 years, letting them think it was theirs. The only thing that needed finding was the truth. And Monday came and went. The Realtor was canceled. The retirement community in Arizona faded into fiction. And Diane and Frank learned what it felt like to live in someone else's house. even when that someone else was the son-in-law they'd spent 5 years dismissing. Karma doesn't always come quickly. Sometimes it waits 5 years, accumulating interest, until the perfect moment to remind people that the ones they step on might be the ones holding them up. The lease is month to month. They know it. I know it. The balance of power is clear. And in the house that I saved, with the family I chose, we're finally home.